Welcome back, everyone. I am now going to ask Professor Michael Tomlin to introduce our closing speaker, Sherry Frear.
Thank you. Sherry Frear, again, as a leader, has distinguished her role in any number of ways. Her preparation, though, is exquisite. You know, the reality is that in addition to her master's in preservation and her master's in landscape architecture at Cornell, this is an important point too, was a thesis on garden apartments in Washington, D.C. Way ahead of the time, I point out that for those of you interested in 20th century materials, right? And garden apartments really have become a hot topic in Washington, D.C., as you may know. The fact that in addition to that, she spent time with the General Services Administration, so she has some sense about what it is that the programming of the government is all about, and the planning of the review and the compliance. Essentially, she was a natural to fall into the possibility if anyone would have recognized. But I would point out, in addition, she is the first landscape architect to lead the nation's flagship historic preservation programs. Yes, Rachel, we have to clap, right? And it's very interesting because, Rachel, I will point out once again the role that ESF had in promoting from PACNY, as it turns out, people like Bob Page, who essentially, behind the scenes, prepared the way in which we think about landscapes and cultural landscapes. And that whole discussion, we could go on in an entire hour lecture in the developing sensitivity to historic landscapes, both urban and rural, and the development of the Park Service's understanding of recordation, including historic landscapes, not just engineering and architecture, all of this. It's a fantastic change in any number of ways, because from outside the United States, the sensitivity to landscapes has increased so remarkably. And I recall this because I was recently on a panel with the Association for Preservation Technology dealing with historic urban landscapes at a worldwide level, with all sorts of initiatives that are taking place. So Sherry's the right person at the right time, right? In any number of ways. We're delighted to have her with us to close with her comments about how it is that she's seen the conference, and also understanding what it is the National Register is all about. Sherry, it's all yours.
Thank you, Michael. You are too kind. I did indeed fall into this position. It was never my intention to have this leadership role. I am as startled as some folks are to find me in this role, but here I am, and I hope that I can do some good. I do want to share that before I took this job, I consulted with Michael. I had two offers at the same time. One was for a position as a landscape architect, design and construction, work I know cold. I never feel more at home than on a job site. But I'd done that before. And Michael, true to form, didn't advise me either way. He simply offered wise counsel, as he so often does, and lets me draw my own conclusions. And I decided to go for the bigger challenge, and it is a challenge every day. But I am very pleased to be here with you today. I have some slides to share with you. I currently have a cat in my notes. So let me see if I can roust him off. He was sleeping soundly until, of course, about noon. So let me first see if I can successfully share my screen. It was a little bit of a challenge for me as I'm not accustomed to working with Zoom. And I am just working with one screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. There we go.
Good.
See if I can minimize all of our faces and run through these slides. So as I've said, I'm pleased to have this opportunity to discuss the issue of ensuring diversity amongst National Register listings and National Historic Landmark designations. And just a point of order with respect to terminology. Throughout this presentation, throughout this talk, I'll be referring to National Register listings as opposed to the very cumbersome phrase National Register listings and NHL designations. As you all know, those are two very different processes that have their own sets of criteria, but it's very cumbersome to keep using those two phrases. And everything I say with respect to the National Register is applicable to the NHL program as well. So the historic preservation field has long asked the question of what for whom. Over the past several years, attention is focused on properties listed in the National Register. You may have seen these articles concerning a lack of diversity among those properties. So what is diversity? Like Bishop Baskerville Burroughs, I think it's helpful to define our terms. Here are two definitions. One, the state of being diverse, variety, as in National Register listed properties represent a diversity of architectural styles. Two, the practice or quality of including or involving people from a range of different social and ethnic backgrounds and of different genders, sexual orientations, etc. As in less than 10% of properties listed in the National Register reflect the diversity of our country's population. And it is this second definition that applies to our discussion today. Excuse me. So what's that about less than 10% of properties listed in the National Register being associated with cultural, ethnic, or identity communities? Let's put that percentage in context by looking at some numbers. There are more than 96,000 properties listed in the National Register. That represents more than 1.8 million resources. And there are 2,621 National Historic Landmarks. So what gets listed? It's not my intention to provide a lecture on National Register practice, but to frame our discussion, let's briefly review. Property must possess significance under one or more criteria, and it must retain integrity, although not all 7 aspects need to be present. So what's the goal? This is a quote I'll return to again and again. These criteria are worded in a manner to provide for a wide diversity of resources. There's been talk of fixing the National Register, of changing the regulations, of developing new areas of significance, or a sliding scale for integrity. And yet the criteria for assessing historic significance and physical integrity was crafted, explicitly crafted, to provide for a wide diversity of resources. But is the application of those criteria fulfilling that responsibility? What's the challenge? I believe a major challenge in ensuring diversity among National Register listings is a misunderstanding of integrity. Integrity is simply the ability of a property to convey its significance. So how much integrity is necessary? I've seen any number of nominations that have referred to properties as having good integrity or retaining sufficient integrity. And indeed, I know I've done this myself in drafting nominations. But it's important to remember that this guidance from the National Register Bulletin 15, historic properties either retain integrity, they convey their significance through their physical presence, or they do not. Let's look at 3 examples. This multi-story brick building in Jackson, Mississippi was constructed in 1903. Its roof and 3rd story were destroyed by fire in 1938. And the bottom image shows the appearance of the building in 1977 when a nomination was submitted to the National Register. Let's see what the nomination reviewers have to say about this property. The historian stated, while building has been very substantially altered, it was not nominated for architecture, but for education and social humanitarian. And although the statement is not very strong in these areas, for Black Mississippians, Jackson State has had quite a distinguished history. The architectural historian countered, the first building on Jackson State University campus radically altered so as to affect integrity. So let's pause a moment for a poll. I am not availing myself of the Zoom poll ability, but let's try this. What do you think? Was this property listed, not listed, or are you unsure? And may I suggest, if you think it was listed, give a thumbs up, and I will have to rely on someone else to tell me what the count looks like, because I am afraid to move out of full screen in presentation mode.
Zoe, can you do the count?
Yep, I'm looking now. So use your, either go in the chat or use the thumbs up on the screen reactions.
What do you think, Zoe? Do you have a sense of whether folks think this property was listed?
It looks like we're getting more not listed than listed and or unsure. We've only gotten a few confident listed answers.
This property is Ayer Hall on the campus of Jackson State University, a historical Black university. It was indeed listed on the National Register in 1977 at a state level of significance in education and social/humanitarian movements with a period of significance of 1903. This is an example of how integrity has been, and I believe should be, applied. Although the building has been substantially altered, it was found eligible for listing because it was identified as significant under criterion A for its role in historical events, not criterion C for architecture. The building continues to present as an educational facility. By contrast, it does not present as an example of colonial revival architecture. As the nomination statement of significance explains, other considerations, quote, have necessarily outweighed stylistic ones throughout the building's history, end quote. Let's take a look at another property. Here's a single-story house in Las Vegas, originally built in 1942 and expanded in 1955. Carport was added in 1975. This property served as a boarding house for almost 2 decades. Here's a listing for it in the 1949 edition of the Green Book. As you all know, the guidebook developed by and for Black travelers to help them find safe accommodations in an era of segregation. So let's pause again for a poll. And what do you think? Was this property listed, not listed, or are you unsure about it? And Zoe, if I could again tap your assistance.
Of course, yep. I think the chat was working well before, so go ahead and pop your answer in there. Okay, I'm seeing more unsures this time. A couple are saying listed, but I think this consensus is unsure.
Harrison's Guest House was indeed listed on the National Register in 2016 for its local significance in Black heritage and entertainment and recreation. Its period of significance is 1942 to 1960. The nomination noted that the design of the house had been disrupted by the modern additions, including the carport and an attached shed. But the nomination stated, and the keeper agreed, that the property retains integrity of location, setting, workmanship, materials, feeling, and association. Our last example is a brick school building completed in 1958 in Howardville, Missouri. The building has been vacant since 2002. So let's pause again for a last poll. What do you think? Was this property listed, not listed, or are you unsure? And Zoe, I trust you're checking on that. Thank you.
Okay, this is a pretty even split at the moment. It looks like we're getting 3 or 4 for listed and a couple 3 or 4 for not listed. So seems to be up in the air.
The Howardville School was indeed listed in the National Register in 2017. Property is a good reminder that condition is not integrity. The school was purpose-built to serve Black students. It opened its doors in 1958, 4 years after the Supreme Court's ruling in Brown versus Board of Education. Howardville itself was established in 1953 by Travis Howard as a rural African-American community. He served as the school's principal and taught classes until 1965. Property's period of significance is 1958 to 1968 for the 10 years it operated as a segregated school. So, why is integrity an issue? That is, why has integrity become a hot issue in historic preservation in the past several years? Well, I believe it's because properties that have fallen into disrepair due to neglect or disinvestment, often as a result of systemic racism, may be overlooked. And when properties of importance to people and communities are not surveyed, are not nominated, are not listed, the National Register fails its responsibility to be the nation's official list of districts, sites, buildings, structures, and objects significant in American history, architecture, archaeology, engineering, and culture. That is, of course, from 36 CFR 60.1, and I find myself turning to the regs constantly. There's much good direction there. And when we at the Register disagree or feel that we're losing our way forward on any particular issue, I again recommend that we go back to the regs and see what direction we should be taking. I think they're very broadly written and they provide a great deal of guidance. So let me tell you about some of the initiatives the National Register and the National Historic Landmarks Program are pursuing to better ensure diversity among listings and designations. We're revising the bulletins. All are more than 20 years old, and all will greatly benefit from updated language and current examples. I think the bulletins have truly stood the test of time. I think they simply need a refresh. There's been talk that some of the language might not be as accessible to non-preservationists, and we do want to make sure that we're inviting everybody to the conversation. First up is Bulletin 38, Traditional Cultural Places. This bulletin's reissuance is a priority of Secretary Deb Haaland, the first Native American to serve as the Secretary of Interior. I am working now with a team to determine just how we will move forward with respect to outreach. A great deal of outreach was done, I would say, before 2017. And I think we need to revisit some of that to ensure that all voices are heard. It's, again, a fairly timeless publication. Again, everything can use a refresh and an update. I don't think it's gotten stale in the past 7 years, or 7 years, excuse me, since 2017. It hasn't gotten stale in the past several years, but I think it is worthwhile to go back out for comments and review before we move forward. It is my hope that this is reissued within the next 12 months. Additionally, we're developing a vehicle for providing information on best practices. This will be a shorter, smaller document than our bulletins, something on the order of 5 or so pages, something that can be quickly developed and distributed as needed to address emerging issues without the need to revise and reissue the bulletins. The bulletins, of course, are very lengthy documents. Quite a bit of vetting happens with that. To wait 5-10 years between issuance before we provide any additional guidance on particular topics is not helpful to folks who are trying to draft nominations. So hopefully a vehicle such as this will help provide that additional information as we move forward. And we are improving our internal workflow applications. The National Register Information System, or NRIS, is our workflow application that we use to track and process National Register nominations, but it can be a more robust research tool. I hold off calling it a database. It's not quite there, but it's my intention to get it there. To do this, we're expanding the choices of areas of significance, so we may more readily identify properties associated with particular cultural, ethnic, or identity groups. Here you see a piece of a National Register nomination form from 1972 with 25 areas of significance to choose from. Today, there are 51 areas and 56 cultural, ethnic, and identity sub-areas. Of course, then as now, proponents can select other and specify, but we have found that folks tend to like a list to work from. It helps certainly SHPOs and FPOs manage their inventories, and as well as helping us to manage our inventory. But if others appropriate, that is always appropriate to specify. Related to this effort, we're reviewing older nominations, those from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, to assess them for their possible significance to cultural, ethnic, or identity groups. We'll capture that information in NRIS in a separate field so that properties of importance to these groups can be readily identified. This effort will also help us identify which nominations may be right for updating. For example, Ayer Hall, the first example that we looked at in this presentation, would not turn up in a search of NRIS for significance in Black or African American heritage, because that area of significance was not specified by the authors of the nomination. It certainly wasn't among the checkboxes on the form in 1977, and by then there were 29 choices, and the nomination's authors did not call it out under other. That said, please know it's not my intention to criticize the authors. They certainly did the best they could with the form provided to them in 1977. But now in 2021, we have an opportunity to capture the fuller story of properties and make that information available. I'll end here with a few thoughts. As former Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill is said to have quipped, "All politics is local." And I think the same is true of preservation. All preservation is local. Indeed, the National Register of Historic Places is largely an inventory of locally significant properties. And I've run the numbers. More than 70,000 of the 96,000 plus listings have a level of significance of local. We've heard over these past 3 days from a global preservation community and I am struck by the similarities in our work, namely the importance of local efforts, of local context. We heard Bishop Baskerville Burroughs speak of the importance of listening to those who don't often get listened to, of building local networks, of asking, who do we need to get to the meeting, who can then get others to the meeting to push that lever that sets the community in motion. Kamalika spoke of everyday heritage, of protected and unloved properties, and provided examples of community engagement that lead to community empowerment. Katie's Section 106 Roundtable addressed many of the challenges that many of us have faced during this global pandemic. Likewise, in the roundtable discussion among Swapna, Miriam, Gabby, and Ritika, we heard about the similar challenges of lack of funding, conflicts among stakeholders, and unenforced regulations in 3 different countries. And Miriam brought us a case from Pakistan, sharing the challenges of working with numerous oversight agencies and organizations, something I'd encountered working in Washington, D.C., where work on preservation properties is subject to review by an alphabet soup of agencies. Olivia and Zoe and Anna shared their experiences bringing forward local stories, with Anna's work rising organically from her lived experience. And Maihar likewise shared how his early lived experiences brought him to architecture. He spoke of learning from the past to design for the future, and stressed the importance of context in the ordered generation of design. Finally, Gretchen and Andy spoke of the local cultural circularity and circular economy through the recycling of materials. And Gabby presented a property from Argentina, which literally embodied challenges in addressing its layers of local history. In closing, I'll share this quote: "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Sherry. That was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. If I could just press a little bit, because there's an aspect of the discussion that hasn't touched upon it in the 3 days, and it is not anyone's particularly oversight, but it touches on what it is that you're doing at the National Register. And it's something I'm doing in a different venue with a different group of people outside of Cornell. And that is the role of heritage education in inculcating the values in the K through 12 sequences. And there is a kind of collateral parallel to what it is that you're doing with the bulletins. And that is, there's teaching with historic places, which makes use of the National Register and essentially propels that in the hands of little folks, more particularly with teachers. Putting this down at the local level, because there is as much money given to cities as there is school districts. If you look at this statistically, the school systems have a budget which is equivalent to many communities. Is there any thought that teaching with historic places could be somehow or another again refreshed, right? And the reason I'm thinking about this is, at the moment, I'm dealing with a group of Boston-based engineers and landscape architects who want to get into the school system of Boston. And as it turns out, I'm putting them in touch with an alum from here who has been a school principal and as an educational consultant has as much experience in doing things that anyone in GSA would. There's an institutional knowledge there that we're tapping. And as it turns out, this is a group that is sponsored by the Association for Preservation Technology, and is rising to the fore. They've asked me to rejoin the board to re-energize the organization in that domain. Interesting to me that the board is vast majority female and vast majority professional in a way in which, quite frankly, Charles Peterson, one of my teachers, of course, who gave you HABs, right, really never anticipated, I'm sure. But that's a long preamble. I'd be interested in your institutional kind of framework or reflections about how it is that we can roll out and participate.
I would love to see more collaboration between the National Register and Barbara Little over at Teaching with Historic Places. Are of course, you know, those organizational impediments, but I think it's critical, and I think it's a missed opportunity if it doesn't happen in school at the K through 12 stage. I think it would be wonderful, and actually that's something I've been thinking of looking into. I talked about how we're going to be able to identify which, eventually it'll be quite a long-term project, which nominations are ripe for updating. It would be wonderful to be able to take those to schools and invite them to start participating in that sort of work. If it's a property in their neighborhood or property in their larger community, what better way than to help people understand what the National Register is, what historic properties are, than to get them involved at that age, actually doing that work. I've experienced some of that as a landscape architect because I am now working at the program and policy level. I truly miss designing. A job that I truly loved was designing and building playgrounds. And I do that as volunteer work now for the city of Baltimore. And the best community meetings I have are the ones with the kids because they're very vocal about what they want to see on their site. And it's better yet when they draw me pictures. But they're very engaged and very excited. And we need to tap that. And that is on my list of things to do.
Thank you. There were questions in the chat.
There are, and if I could address the one that I saw pop up first and pop up several times was the question of landscapes as a resource type. I recall when this came up most recently, 5 or 6 years ago. I know at that time I was with the Marine Corps as a cultural resource manager and attending a meeting conducted by Stan. Oh, Michael, help me with his last name. He's the chief archaeologist at NPS, and I'm completely blanked on it. But there was a lot of talk then about the resource categories and changing it. I think it would be a wonderful idea because site is very specifically defined as something less than landscape. District often covers it. The challenge is this, though. It's a practical challenge. I think we saw what happened in the past several years when the regs got opened up for revision. Mm-hmm. I will be honest with you. I feel I can be honest in this venue, despite the fact that it'll post on YouTube. It perplexed many of us. It terrified many others as to where those regulations were going. It was an incredibly difficult time. I came in at the tail end of it, and it was still a very difficult time. The process began to bog down when OMB began raising a lot of questions. Mm-hmm. And it was clear that their moving forward might have stalled no matter who won the election. But that's our concern with opening up the regs. And while I appreciate and certainly support landscapes as a resource, I'm hesitant to go down that road again.
I'm glad to have you comment on that. We'll have another extensive discussion about that because I'm also dealing with it outside the country in landscapes such as the one that's pictured behind me. That's all That's all good. The shift, you may or may not remember, between the emphasis on site and the shift to what was termed property, and the definition of property and use of that had tremendous implications legally as well. Other questions?
Looks like Rachel has her hand up.
I do, thank you. I just am so grateful that we're having this conversation. And Sherry, thank you so much for your presentation. And I wish I could talk to you all day, actually. I have so many questions and things I'd want to ask. To the point you just raised that I had first raised in the chat about landscape as a resource type, I'm thinking of it not in the case of what is in Michael's background, but in a place like Paley Park, or, you know, Dan Kiley's South Garden at the Art Institute of Chicago, or a place like that, where, you know, is it a site? It's a small park. Is it a site? Is it a district? Because I can see something like the Woodward Park in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is a botanic garden, and it includes buildings, it includes follies, and, you know, there's so much there. I nominated that as a historic district, but I was hopeful that maybe someday there could be a landscape where it really is just a small garden. And right now it seems like the regs, again, it's this open to interpretation issue. Maybe it's not a district, maybe it would just be a site, because the bulletin anyway seems to suggest that a small park could be just listed as a site. So those are the resources I'm thinking of sometimes, and not so much sort of the TCP type landscapes, but that resource type. But I wanted to ask you, because it's so exciting and wonderful, again, to have a landscape architect at the helm of these two programs. And it's so great to hear that you're looking at the bulletins, but I'm wondering if you will be holding more training sessions, whether they are virtual, which is great, or in person, because I remember attending training programs, and there were so many states with amazing resources like California or whatever, and their budgets never allow them to travel out of state. You know, there are so many SHPOs where you just can't travel. But I would love to see training that is required for all National Register staff, required, in order to keep your HPF, in order to maintain, you know what I mean? Because I feel like I have seen National Register staff in different states kind of use the regs as sort of a precedent setting thing, and as a way to kind of maintain the status quo, or say these resources are not what we're interested in, or we all have been led by architectural historians for so long and not social historians, not cultural historians. And so they really, sometimes when you present them something, they'll just say, I can't see it. I don't see it. And they're sort of discounting the local knowledge. And that, so I'm just wondering if there's any thought about that. I don't know if there can be any kind of link of a requirement in order to maintain HPF, but I just feel like there need to be these conversations where you get sort of long-term National Register staff or regulatory staff or leadership, whether it's deputies, but to get people actually, they need to understand we want to include more things in the National Register of Historic Places. It's not the National Register of Pristine Places, the National Register of Perfect Places, or the National Register of Best Designed Places, you know, and history is local. So we have to trust the local people, that they know their stories, they know their history, they know the value, and it's not up to some person sitting in a seat 200, 300 miles away or more whose budget won't allow them to travel to go see it. You know? Yeah,
no, agreed. What I'll call the unevenness of SHPO staffs has been of concern to me. And please know, I am in no way criticizing SHPO staff, because I am keenly aware that funding is at a premium, and again, very uneven. truly believe SHPOs are doing the very best they can with the resources that they have. And I know we all share that. And I hate saying the word my staff, but my staff, the National Register reviewers, all the people who have forgotten more than I will ever know because they've been there so long, do routinely do training with their staff. And I think we need to be more aggressive with that in the same way that, I pointed out, integrity is not a sliding scale. It's not enough or sufficient. And we see it all the time in nominations that are coming to us through SHPOs. And I've said in different venues, and I'll say it again here, if properties are not coming to us that should come to us, that's on us. And by us, I mean the National Register program. We are the national program. It's incumbent on us to provide that guidance to folks that need it. Because again, I will say I am keenly aware that SHPOs are doing the very best work that they can with the resources that they have. If additional training is required, that's our responsibility. Additional guidance, that's our responsibility, which is why we're looking at not only updating these bulletins, but pushing out more examples, because we've heard from folks that that's what they want to see. They do want to see examples that we see every day here at the national office. We're processing well over 2,000 nominations a year from across the country. So we're seeing a wider variety, and we need to be able to take that information back out and share it with folks. And not just SHPOs. We are also looking at how can we reach, I hate the word layperson, but the person who is not a professional. I mean, we know who our contacts are in the SHPO's office, and we know how to reach them, but how do we reach the wider community groups that want to prepare a nomination? We are looking for a way to reach them as well. And you're right, in this day of interconnectivity, we have really been able to leverage this platform to do much more training, to attend more conferences, to do more presentations at those conferences. I am a big believer at my staff getting out in front. Again, they know these things so well. They've seen so many examples. I support them 100% in participating in the conferences, and we can do that so much more now that we don't have to continually tap a travel budget. So,
and I just wanted to offer before I stop, just that I feel like you have a ready-made nomination that's there if you might look. I put it in the chat, but the K-Town Historic District in Chicago was, the nomination has so much social and cultural history in it. It's an Eastern European immigrant neighborhood. All the streets begin with the letter K. Which is why it's called K-Town, but it transitioned into a predominantly African-American neighborhood in the 1940s, 50s, certainly. And it was the home to so many important African-American musicians in Chicago. Dinah Washington, the jazz singer, became the first Black homeowner on her block. Martin Luther King Jr. rented a home there in order to bring national attention to the plight of the living conditions of tenants in Chicago and other urban areas. And I was not at the Illinois SHPO when it was nominated. I believe the nomination went forward in 2010, so it's not that old. But it was, all of this social history is in the nomination, but it was listed only for C, for its architecture. Because the guidance that was given, and again, I was not there, and I know your staff and I know SHPO staff, they do the best they can, but I don't know what they felt they needed, what more information they needed in order to support the social history, the cultural history, the African-American history. And it was a community-led initiative, but for whatever reason, they felt a little tentative, and they felt, we're confident, the architecture supports itself, it'll be obvious. Let's just nominate it for C, and you only need one.
Yeah.
So let's just do architecture, and I understand that, but I don't know if there's enough guidance for people to know, is this social history enough? You're not writing a dissertation, right? But so so I just want to encourage you as an example of that. I feel like that nomination is ready to go. Why can't it be revised, just to check the box for A, or it's one of those things. It should come up in a search, as you're saying, an NRIS search for African-American history, and it won't.
Interesting. And one more, if I could address one thing there, and I apologize, everyone, I don't need to turn this into a dialogue between me and Rachel. Just one note I wanted to make, and then I will turn to Zoe, or who was moderating here.
Yes.
With respect to establishing significance, yes, we've all seen that explosion of nominations. You know, I was looking at nominations back from the early 70s, 13 pages long. Maybe a little short if you're doing an entire historic district. But then on the other hand, I've seen nominations coming in at over 200 pages long. And they're telling me that, you know I've been part of those myself at GSA, recounting the history of the post office in trying to document a U.S. post office courthouse. And we have to bust that myth that there needs to be that. I'm not discouraging it. Folks want to provide that much, great. And it can be valuable to the context. But we do need to bust the myth that the nominations need to be a certain number of pages. They simply need to demonstrate that significance. And yes, that's subjective and it's going to vary. But we need to assure folks that they too can do a nomination. These community groups can do nominations. And we at the Register are always happy to help folks along. We can't be pre-decisional. SHPA staff, of course, to the extent that they're able, are able to, certainly able to help folks along with that as well. So, and now I'll stop.
Sherry, I worked with your predecessor, Carol Schull.
I love Carol.
In 1982, there was a problem we had here in Ithaca where the SHPO staff member and the SHPO at the time blocked a nomination. And I asked Carol, isn't there a way in which I can appeal to you directly? We changed the Code of Federal Regulations, so you have that ability.
60.12, we do. Well done.
And Carol, I bless her for that. It was used also for Andy and people in the Syracuse area. It became crucial for the Onondaga County War Memorial because once again, the 50-year rule isn't really a 50-year rule. It's guidance, as Sprinkle has said, has written, right? So this question of modernism, this question of moving basically around the administrative roadblock, not to really avoid the SHPO, but rather to get a reassessment. And that's the beauty of the keeper's position, that an ultimate decision is reached by someone who is not going to be locally affected by the decision directly. Now, federal level, senatorial, cabinet level influences are always swirling around. But the local level of discussion about particularly criterion A, it gives the keeper an enormous amount of influence, if you will, in changing the direction and the tenor of the community, which is really what you want. I'm on a soapbox, so I'll stop.
Always good. It's always a good box for you to be on, Michael.
Well, it's a lot of experience. With respect to training, the recall, if I go back to the 70s, the question that the Park Service always had in stimulating training with the SHPOs was to some degree mitigated by the National Council of Preservation Officers. And that executive director was a Cornellian, Eric Hertfelder. And he made the difference for years. Now, it has changed since that point. But the beauty of the system at the moment, in a sense, is we've got Cornellians who are state preservation officers,
sure,
right? Who can be brought through. The one I'm keeping in mind at the moment is Mark Rodman, who served previously previously in Colorado. And he's not the only one. In Maine, there is another, and so on and so forth. I think we have the capability of networking, and I'm going to suggest this particular forum, that HPPA, essentially become involved with the creation of these policies to assist, because it's this marvelous melding. If you look at the power of the organization, everything from the local to the national and international. And the international aspects have to be kept in mind because the value systems of people from outside the country are coming into the country, and the immigrant patterns are changing automatically. That's the nature of this immigrant nation. The question of really accommodating the local and the global is so essential in establishing community of interest. Other thoughts?
Looks like Katie has a question.
I have a bit of a question that I'm unsure if you can answer, but I'm curious if other people have thoughts too that they could share with me in the chat. My first just general observation is I absolutely agree that I think that more training from park staff would be really helpful to SHPO staff. I was with my SHPO for a year and sat on the kind of resource evaluation committee that evaluated incoming determinations of eligibility, and the people on half of the people on that committee had no background in actually determining eligibility, so it was very inconsistent. And one of the kind of issues in Wisconsin currently is that we have a robust state tax credit system. So there was a push to, if things were just coming in for state tax credits, to find it eligible. But then when it came up to actually listing it in the National Register, there were some issues. But if it was just coming for state tax credits, we can find a way to make it eligible, which of course leads to issues both listing it and then also compliance wise. My, I guess, question to everybody is one of the issues that Wisconsin kind of keeps coming back to, particularly since we're in the north, is that a lot of what happened is during the Great Migration, African Americans from the South came up and took over already constructed buildings and structures. But we have an issue with getting our consultants, due to time and training and budgets, to look at the second or third occupants of buildings to find that that significance. And so I'm just kind of curious if anyone else, like, what other people are doing to fix that problem, because like I said, they're typically looking at the first owner. They've slightly altered the windows, therefore it doesn't have significance under C. They're not looking under A. And I know our SHPO is really frustrated with us and with it, and so are we, because it is that people aren't looking past those second owners. And sure, it doesn't have integrity to when it was first constructed, but it may have integrity to when important occupants were in the building for that criterion A story. So I'm just kind of curious what other people are doing to kind of get their consultants to push past that.
Thoughts?
I can speak to it a little bit. Oh, you can go ahead, Andrew.
I'll just briefly add my 2 cents as a consultant. You know, all I can really say is that I would credit my training at Cornell to enable me to see social cultural history. And I realize not every consultant has that training, and there's a wide variety of professional training for consultants, even those that purport to be cultural resources management consultants. But I just, yeah, I don't know. That's hard to say. I mean, choose your consultants wisely and look at their portfolio. Honestly, it's the best thing you can do is vet them properly.
I was just going to add it. One of the main things that I see among consultants is how to phrase this. There's often an interest in getting in and getting out and getting the work done quickly. And that's when I think it was Rachel put in the comments that consultants don't see the social history because they're looking at architecture. I think that we definitely encourage our historians to talk to people, because you're right, you know, like when we land in some random place in Georgia to do a survey, we look at a house, we see a house, you know, and I had a house like my first year doing 106 work that turned out to be a social club for the African-American community, specifically women, and never would have gotten that from just looking at the building. Got that from talking to people, from talking to neighbors. You know, whenever we do our surveys, we encourage people to try and speak to the homeowner, speak to the neighbors. Whenever we talk to them, you just sort of ask questions about, hey, do you know anything about this house over here as well? We reached out to, we learned more about this from the local historical society, just engaging the process of speaking to members of the community, if not the particular property owner, to see what you can find. In addition to just research, just trying to like see what you can find for that address, for that location, for that area, newspapers for the time periods. I mean, there's a lot of things we do, but it's the main thing is to try and combat the attitude of get out and get it done, you know? So that's what we try to do.
I would just add that if I could just for a second, just to say that I think, Andy, if you're referring to the training that you get here at the program, at the Cornell program, I think that for any of us who are in education, as I am now, I feel like we have a responsibility, or when we speak to people in the community or whatnot, consultants need to be curious. We need to teach curiosity about the built environment and going beyond what you can see, you know, and just, again, it's the modest buildings. I remember when I was doing regulatory review in Texas and a very modest mid-century building came in, and again, mid-century was a harder push, you know, 15 years ago or more. But this modest building happened to be the headquarters for the African-American, you know, State Garden Club. So they had segregated garden clubs. There's the Texas Garden Club Association and then the African-American one. And, you know, it's a very modest building and nobody thought to look until we looked. And so I think it's, again, just can we talk to people in the community, and we need to, if we're educators, we need to help encourage people to be curious about what they see. So when they do become consultants, that they can maybe try to push for that a little bit. But as has already been mentioned, it's budget and time and in and out.
If I could just add one more thing on what we're saying is that, you know, if we're talking about a survey for Section 106, that will end in a mitigation agreement. And so really what we've been trying to do at EDR is get out in front of that at the beginning, because often the people you reach out for to identify potential mitigation projects are the same people that have that local knowledge and can give you the lay of the land locally as far as the social and cultural aspects of the built environment are concerned.
There's a lot of discussion in the chat. There's a lot of discussion. Does Richard, do you want to elaborate? Yes.
Oh, yes. Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's just that in the real world, consultants are bidding against each other, and the lowest bid will usually get the job, and the lowest bid usually does not put in all the work they need to actually determine whether or not a property is eligible. They will see whether or not it's eligible under C based on looking at the building, write up something very minimal. SHPO will typically accept that, and then that's the end of it. So what do we do to change things?
What has your experience been in the underbidding, the range in the bidding from your knowledge of your competitors? What's the range of difference? Is there a way in which more money could be provided if there were better quality? If there's some evaluation of the track record or the quality of the work?
It depends on who's funding. There are some state agencies that are better than others. There are some, and I think it used to be that like CLG grants were never enough to cover the proper work that it would take to do a proper historical architectural survey, for example. It's getting better now, and I can now choose not to bid on projects that I know I would have to work 3 hours for, but it's still difficult. So there is still quite a bit of a range. I mean, I remember a year or two ago, I didn't bid on a project where I thought it was, I think CLG funded, and it was like half the amount it needed to have been to actually do the proper work to look at that community in the detail that needed to be done for a survey. And what do you do in that situation? I just didn't bid, and somebody else did, and so that's, you get what you pay for. But
well, I'm wondering if Sherry, the National Council of State Preservation Officers, can't be enlisted somehow to do a survey to begin to collect the data sufficient to tackle the question that Richard and others are saying. It seems, Andy, Richard, and that's from the private consultant's point, but from the point of view of the SHPO office reviewing this, it would seem to be that there's an opportunity here to revisit the issue and basically think of not only administrative but financial incentives.
I have a meeting with Eric Hine tomorrow. I will raise that issue with him.
Good.
Eric and I now meet monthly to discuss common concerns.
I'm delighted. Good, good, good.
I believe that Katie has had her hand up for a little while as well.
Oh, I did not take it down, but I was a consultant for 6 years prior to moving to SHPO, and yes, it's incredibly frustrating as a consultant. As anyone saw my talk yesterday, I worked for the firm of Mead & Hunt, which tends, because it's a larger firm, has a little bit more overhead, and so oftentimes our bids for projects in the state of Wisconsin tend to come in a bit high, but we also have the people who can do the work and do a more robust kind of research. But there was just as I was leaving Mead & Hunt to go to SHPO, there was an RFP for a survey of public schools in Milwaukee, specifically looking at them not for architecture, but for a criterion A or B story. And the consultant who got it knew they underbid. And when they got it, they specifically came to the SHPO staff and said, we completely underbid this to get the project. We can't do it in the amount of money we actually said we'd do it for. And I mean, our SHPO staff went, well, you said you'd do it, so this is what it is. And I mean, I believe all of our SHPO staff believes it's a subpar project, but they wanted to get some information out there to start looking at. Milwaukee has lots of schools, and the city is hoping to get rid of some of them. So that's why they wanted them at least somewhat evaluated before the city starts selling them to developers. But it is a chronic issue, particularly here in Wisconsin, which happens quite a bit. And I don't see a way to fix it other than the federal government giving SHPOs more money to do surveys.
I think there's the potential. Certainly, I am not in charge of the budget. It'd be a wonderful thing if I were. I've seen the Presbud for 23. I'm sure there are increases, but of course, that's just the president's budget, and those things change up.
Matthew, you had a question.
Yeah, and I just wanted to share a story. At ACOM, we have a contract with an agency that will go unnamed, who is notorious for hiring the lowest bid. And we are involved in the project management side of this contract. So we are often retained, my team is retained to review the work of the lowest bid, which is just a regular frustration built into our schedule, because it is, I understand, like, a lot of firms are just trying to get a foot in the door for certain types of work. I've definitely been in that position too with a different company. And so it's just tough. It tends to, whether or not it goes to, at least in my state, it doesn't necessarily go towards the SHPO or the state funding. It tends to be connected to that agency, often that federal agency, recognizing that to get the better work, you've got to pay a little bit more upfront, which is a challenging case to make, especially to agencies that don't necessarily value good compliance work.
Ritika, did you want to unmask your comment from the chat?
Yeah, I just wanted to elaborate this point of lowest bidding, because this is a phenomena that we face also in India. Now, in some institutions, they do value technical consistency of the firms, where you have to present your firm's work, your past works that's been carried out in restoration. And I've actually participated in making certain bids like this. And what happens is, in this case, the technical score of the bid is about 70 to 80%. That takes away the firms who just wants to quote low in the financial bid and try to get the project. So there is a sense of control of the consistency of the firm which is applying the job. So I think if this aspect, I don't know if it happens in US, but if it's not happening, I think this is one aspect can be looked out by the institutes there who are undertaking architects and historic preservationists as consultants for their projects. So it's just one aspect I thought that I could elaborate, that we've been, it's like a solution to this act of underbidding.
Something for Sherry to consider with Eric. Other questions?
I see Rachel has asked the question of whether I have seen a difference of quality between nominations for recognition of social history diversity versus nominations submitted primarily to achieve tax credits. And that's a very easy answer, yes. Through the preliminary determination of an initial listing, goodness, the documentation is often very thin. And it's very clear that, and this will show my bias against developers, that developers are indeed looking to make money, as developers are wont to do. And I don't begrudge them that. But any number of these applications are really a bit of a stretch.
So I guess if I could just add on to that, do you think that there is a greater burden placed upon nominations that maybe are not being nominated for reasons of design, high style, or excellent examples, best local example of X? You know, do you think that these criterion A nominations are more difficult, or?
Not at the National Register, no. I know my staff is not doing that, but I do appreciate that before these nominations reach us, they may be stalled by that very thing. And again, I think it's incumbent on the national program to provide the training to the SHPOs or state review boards to educate them on the fact that it's not all about the architecture, and that the documentation of significance and integrity does not need to be 200 pages long. Again, there's no cutoff. There's no 30 pages, 40 pages, 100 pages, but we have the examples here at the National Register, of course, and we are working on not only pushing them out in this new vehicle that we'll develop, but I'm actively working with one of our archivists to build a better website where we will have page after page after page of examples that people can readily access. Right now, it's a little clunky. That is not my team's fault. We inherited a page format that was really built for the parks. I find our page so frustrating when I go to it, and I don't know if I want to learn or discover. That works really well for planning a park visit. That does not work so well when you're trying to find technical information on National Register's processes, or, God forbid, NHL processes. But that's it. We are working on trying to set that up a little bit differently so we can make those examples available to people. Because I can sit here all day long and tell folks it doesn't need to be that long. But if I could show them, that's a winning argument, I think.
You know, seeing as you mentioned it, I would love to see training not only for the SHPO staff, as you said, or other practitioners, but you mentioned in your comment just now, state boards of review. And I would love it if there could be some kind of film or some kind of PowerPoint or whatever that, again, sort of required viewing for onboarding state board of review members. I know each state can train their state board of review members however they see fit. But I would love it because, again, there are different levels of familiarity. And so it would be great if there could be that kind of training material that's also for these onboarding or continuing state board of review members. Yeah,
that's something that the staff has brought to my attention, the need for training of the state review boards. And our communications folk will be very excited to hear that you would like to see a video or something more interactive, because they've talked to me about how can we develop a video or some sort of interactive visual communication for you. And I don't know what that is, because that is not my area of expertise, but the comms people are very excited about that. So it's probably something we'll be pursuing.
Thank you.
Other thoughts? Sherry, you've obviously struck several nerves, right? And that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. It was wonderful. Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. We are here to attempt to, if not solve your problems, at least assist on the way to a resolution. I do want to say to Richard Carlson, I saw your note about Black landlords. If you could, I will put my email, my work email here in the chat. Richard, if you want to drop me a line about that, and if anybody else ever needs to reach me, my work email is the best way to reach me, not my Cornell email. I'm not even sure what the password is for that account.
Good. Well, Mayar, did you want to now think about next steps? In addition to the thank yous once again, the next steps?
Sure. Thank you all very much. I think we learned a lot and we had a great discussion, not only today, but during the symposium. I would like to ask you to basically stay for a few more minutes and let us know your thoughts about the symposium in general, any like takeaways or any suggestions from, any suggestions for us, for the organizers. And I also like to know what you think about the future. If you like to see this kind of virtual symposium being an annual event while we go back to the normal in-person life or not. So we would be happy to hear your comments on that. I'm getting comments on chat. Yes, virtual.
Virtual. I just want to say it's so wonderful to be able to meet people from all over the world, and just to have so many different presentations of experience. And I realize nothing takes the place of going out after a conference session or gathering in a hotel lobby excitedly or whatever, and that will never be duplicated. But this is so fantastic. I feel like post-pandemic, we need to keep this.
I mean, we don't have to kind of like do this instead of seeing each other in person. We can still see each other in person in live conferences, but additionally we can do this, and we can keep continuing doing this as like an annual event.
I think this has been a really terrific opportunity. You know, as I mentioned, we've been able to do more training and more outreach because of these platforms. I do have to say, personally speaking, I now have this big fancy job and nowhere to go. But that said, I'm sure we'll be traveling again to some extent, but I think this is terrific. This program has been well run. I've enjoyed it very much. And I've enjoyed the format of, 3 hours, 3 hours, 3 hours, because I think we've all been in those conferences that run maybe 8 hours a day. And oh my, so much to take in. They're both engaging but exhausting. So I really appreciate this format.
Thank you. Barbara, you have a comment to say?
I loved all the presentations, and I think it's not a criticism, but there were various types of presentations that were sort of intermixed. And it was a little bit harder to say that they followed each other, but at the same time, they actually did, which was weird.
I agree.
It was like, well, wait a minute. She's talking about the tiles in the floor. What happened to them? And that's, that meant that there was a connection there between the various presentations. I really enjoyed all of them for different reasons, but in a virtual presentation kind of thing, I would love to see more like this is what we've been doing kind of presentations, because those kind of presentations could be like 1 hour, 2 hours, once every 5 months, or you know what I mean? Sporadically. Yeah. And not a lot of planning required, hopefully, but just it's going to be, Saturday morning or Sunday morning or whatever, and it was just really interesting to find out what people were doing, like Gabriella in what her country, and just the kind of stuff she was finding was fabulously interesting on a kind of an almost PBS special way. I loved it. It was, and there were so many interesting things about the whole conference that I could keep going. So, and Sherry's cat certainly was terribly entertaining. So because it doesn't like her to talk on the All right, that's all I wanted to say was
Thank you.
thank you to all the people who put this together, and it was really, really nice to see the variety of stuff that's going on and hear the conversations, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew, you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to also say I really enjoyed this symposium. It's been great, and I hope we can do more virtual activities like this. In general, in this field, like the thing I enjoy the most is think tanking issues and problems with my team or with other partners that I work with here in Georgia. Bringing this hive mind together more often would be so invaluable. And I would love to, in addition to doing a virtual symposium, maybe occasionally having more virtual roundtables with this group to just sort of discuss various projects or activities. Because I would just love to have the input of all of you on the things that I encounter and to hear the things you're working on, because it's incredibly valuable.
Great, thank you. Ashima?
Hi. So yeah, this was awesome. Thank you so much to you and the entire team. It was fabulous. I think, oh, hang on one sec. Yeah, that was the fun part of this conference, juggling 2 kiddos and the conference. Yeah, it was really, I think it was really fabulous in all the diversity of projects and alumni and the presentations that you all put together. It was really, really great. I think I just had one small feedback, which was I was constantly kind of switching through all the profiles to see who all are there. And I felt like maybe at the for the next sessions, for the next time, if you could ask audiences or participants to maybe just put a quick note in the chat about their graduation year and what they are up to now. That also would be like a good way, like a quick catch up to see where everyone is, what they're doing, and what year they got out of the program. Just to kind of, sort of renew a little bit of that sense of community, that would be good. Because, I knew many of the names, but I didn't know what they were up to. So that would be nice. And that could, I think, help with some of that in-person conversation that you guys were talking about, in sort of jumpstarting, oh, hey, yeah, you're doing this. That's really cool. Yeah, let's talk about that offline or something like that. So that may be one way to kind of, replicate some of those in-person conversations.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you. And I think being virtual provided opportunity for someone like you with 2 kids to be able to participate. So this is great.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was really good, and I second everyone's sort of saying that in a virtual format really work. My 3.5-year-old was very interested in many of the presentations, so I'm really excited for the future. So thank you again.
Sure.
This is Sylvia Augustus. This was wonderful. I did not, for whatever reason, I guess I didn't check my email regularly or whatnot, but I didn't find out about this until almost the day before. But I'm glad that I saw it and I was able to participate. I do think the virtual is a really great format, and I think even though some people might be zoomed out, there's so much value when many people working in historic preservation can barely afford to travel, and their employers are not willing to pay for travel. So I would recommend that we continue to do this. Maybe there's a hybrid approach for people who can travel that are on the East Coast. Or maybe we do these virtual ones like Barb was stating, they're kind of informal and they happen very regularly. And I think Ashima's comment about, us putting some kind of profile up or whatever, so people know what class people are in and where people are working. And then also, if possible, the chat, the way it's set up right now, you can't chat individuals, at least from where I'm sitting, where it's set up on my computer. But I've just recently participated in a writer's workshop, and you were able to chat other writers, and so, and maybe if you could.
So you can do it here as well.
Oh, okay. Because on mine, it just says, I can't find everybody in the chat here. But anyway, so I think that's a good way that people can kind of like reach out and say, hey, are you in such and such area? Maybe we can connect and talk about preservation, et cetera. So I thank you. And this has been very well done,
Sure.
very professional. And I look forward to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Actually, where it says to everyone, if you click on everyone, you can find other participant and send a direct message. So maybe this was our mistake not to say that at the beginning. Sorry.
You know, Mayar, I wonder if there is a different setting today, because I know I could individually chat folks yesterday, but now I'm not seeing it. And I'm happy to admit that could be user error on my part, but
okay,
it
maybe
looks different today.
I agree with Sherry. Same thing with me. Last few sessions, I was able to chat with anyone selecting their name in a drop-down menu. Today, I didn't see that option. So
maybe that was something from our side. Yeah, probably. Sorry. Okay, great. Any last minute comments?
Richard asked whether, in fact, there is still an alumni directory as it used to publish every few years. There hasn't been an updated variety, though the alumni membership, the HPPA membership data, has been updated by the membership. I think there's a membership secretary, as I remember.
Yeah, we updated that, but we can like think about sharing it as well. Yes, that's a great suggestion. So I encourage everyone to check HPPA website once in a while. Although I know that you receive the notes from us, emails from us, newsletters, but I also encourage everyone to check the HPPA website. And one more time, I want to encourage all the alumni who are not a member of HPPA to be a member and support us with your membership.
Rachel can join, by the way. We've had non-alumni join on more than one occasion. In fact, some have become life members. I'm not suggesting you jump up to that level, but I'm just suggesting we have had people who have believed enough in the organization to make a difference.
Michelle, do you have a comment to add?
Just would like to reiterate, thank you to all of those who have participated and attended this weekend, and a special thank you to all of our speakers. All of your presentations were really interesting and thought-provoking, and I am really excited about the future and hopefully making this symposium happen again soon.
Thank you, Michelle, because you did so much of the work behind the scenes.
Yes. Melanie, do you have a comment? Yeah, or Michelle.
Yes, I'd like to just reflect a little on just the totality of this event and all the presentations, how it was really striking to me that while we're all so dispersed across the world, we still have a lot of similarities in the work we do, especially as it pertains to documenting marginalized communities. So.
Very good, thank you. Zoe, do you want to say something?
Well, just that I'm happy to be here, and I'm also excited for a long membership with HPPA, and after next year, I'll be an official member, I suppose.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. And Shannon also was a member of this committee who did all the social media work, but she couldn't be with us today. I don't have anything else to share. Just want to thank everyone for participation, all the participants, all the speakers, everyone. Without you, we couldn't have an event like this. Michael, you have a comment at the end?
Well, I just wanted to thank you, Mayar. It's a high point in the organization. It's Jack Glassman sent Jeff and himself a postcard because he was in the founding HPPA meeting way back when, in a National Trust meeting where essentially we gathered in a restaurant. He sent us the postcards. I was thinking we need maybe a trivia night of HPPA trivia, really, because we've all gone through various stages, various associations. I mean, I have wonderful memories of the trip I took to India with Sylvia. I have wonderful pictures of Sylvia in front of the Taj Mahal. The reality is that I really, you don't get paid a hell of a lot as a university professor, truth be known, but the reality is that my satisfaction is seeing you all doing more than ever I could do to experience and work with one another in a manner I don't think anybody would have imagined. So thank you all.
Thank you very much, Michael, for all the great advices and suggestions.
Moving right along.
Excellent. Thank you all very much again, and have a wonderful day. Hope to see you all later soon. We will share the videos and we will provide you with a link in the HPPA website in the next week.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye.